también, que crece ya hacia otras aplicaciones que todavía no terminamos de conocer o de percibir. Está ya dentro del área de la propiedad intelectual y entonces vienen algunas preguntas como ¿en qué forma va a afectar positiva, negativamente la manera en la que prestamos servicios de propiedad intelectual? ¿Esto implica que va a desplazar ciertas prácticas y servicios de propiedad intelectual? Pues bien, para poder discutir sobre estos temas, tenemos un panel formado por dos expertos que acompañan a nuestro moderador, Markku Rasanen y Felipe Dannemann. Y presento rápidamente a nuestro moderador, Juan Felipe Acosta, quien es abogado por la Universidad de Rosario, especialista en propiedad intelectual y derecho económico de los mercados por esa misma universidad, magíster de la Universidad Austral de Buenos Aires. Ha realizado varios estudios en temas específicos como el derecho penal económico y la competencia. Adicionalmente, destaca como director de litigios y métodos alternativos de solución de conflictos de la firma Olarte Maure Colombia, de la cual también es miembro de su comité ejecutivo. Ha realizado varias publicaciones en los temas en los que tiene especialidad y su práctica involucra de manera particular el tema de litigios, la prevención y atención a procesos criminales, penales y arbitrales y el derecho de la propiedad intelectual en los temas de antipiratería y antifalsificación, así como el tema de derecho de la competencia. Sin más, quiero dejar entonces en la palabra a Juan Felipe para que arranquemos con este panel que seguramente nos presentará temas interesantes.
Bueno, muchas gracias, muy buenos días. Cuando nos asignaron esta temática, no pudimos dejar de observar que es urgente, demandante, que las firmas que hacen parte de ACIPI, los miembros de ACIPI, revisemos la necesidad de modernizarnos y de estar un paso adelante en la atención de los servicios que se demandan hoy en día en esta cuarta revolución. A blockchain se le llama la cuarta revolución sobre la base de que la información tecnológica y digamos que todo este tema de internet fue considerada la tercera revolución, pero blockchain, que es una solución técnica abierta, sorprendentemente no está afectada, digamos, o no hace parte de nuestro mundo, o no nació como parte de nuestro mundo de propiedad intelectual, y que fue liberada mediante un white paper muy famoso de un personaje mítico que nadie sabe al día de hoy quién es, que se llama Satoshi Watanabe. Pues digamos que esa solución técnica que tradicionalmente se asocia con las criptomonedas realmente es tan revolucionaria que va a afectar necesariamente cómo hacemos todo nuestro trabajo e incluso puede llegar a reemplazar algunas de las funciones que tienen abogados y oficinas públicas de propiedad intelectual. En particular, la tecnología que está detrás de blockchain ofrece tanta seguridad que podría incluso en algunos casos reemplazar escenarios de litigio sobre la propiedad de algún desarrollo en particular, por ejemplo. Entonces, para hablar de este tema tan interesante tenemos a dos panelistas, Markku Rasanen, quien es LLM en propiedad intelectual y derecho a la competencia del Instituto Max Planck en Múnich, también es LLM de Stanford en Derecho, Ciencia y Tecnología y es el Chief Operating Officer de Alcestor, que es una compañía de manejo de datos, pero pues digamos que en la práctica está a la vanguardia del cambio tecnológico y su particular mezcla entre entrenamiento como abogado y profundo conocimiento técnico nos garantizará que en la primera parte de la presentación logremos, en términos simples, entender qué es blockchain, para qué sirve y por qué es tan importante. Tal vez incluso diferenciándolo de lugares comunes como confundirlo con inteligencia artificial. Ese término se usa, blockchain y artificial intelligence se usan al unísono en muchas publicaciones y hace que la gente a veces confunda una cosa con la otra. Entonces vamos a empezar por lo básico. Y después vamos a tener a Felipe Dannemann, que por muchos años ha venido investigando sobre estos temas, ha aplicado y aplica en su asesoría diaria blockchain, es decir, nos va a hablar de aplicaciones reales para nuestra práctica. Felipe ha hecho además un esfuerzo para encontrar muchísimos ejemplos sobre la materia, de tal manera que no se quede esto en abstracción, en un concepto etéreo. Y por otra parte, pues digamos que la presentación va a tratar de responder estas preguntas o tratar estos temas. Blockchain es una solución técnica, pero cómo se puede aplicar a distintas industrias. También vamos a hablar un poquito de cómo blockchain va a destruir ciertas industrias, entonces por eso hablábamos un poco de Schumpeter y decíamos, en 1942 este economista dijo que la innovación se basaba en destruir incluso industrias y volverlas a construir de cero. Entonces vamos a hablar un poquito de eso y ojalá que al final de la presentación pues tengamos resueltas estas inquietudes. Si no las tenemos resueltas, pues trataremos de al menos focalizarlas. Lo mismo se diría respecto de los otros panelistas, y es que afortunadamente tenemos a nuestros dos speakers todo el tiempo con nosotros para resolver inquietudes incluso después de esta presentación. Entonces, sin más preámbulo, Markku, I'll give you the word, and thank you for being here with us.
All right. Hello, everybody. Good to be here. I got the invite here on a short notice from Felipe. I happen to be in Houston, and I'll do my best to explain to you what this blockchain is really about. So, yeah, like basically, like Juan said, I'm doing now a company called Alcestor. We are doing data storage on massive scale. Enterprise storage is my latest project. I'm trained as a lawyer, but now I'm a serial failurist, so a business person basically. So going from failure to failure. Yeah, so this Alcestor, this is the kind of storage for a huge amount of data, a little bit like you know what blockchain is as well. And for example, lately we did a case of 20 petabytes of human genome data in the UK, and to put that in the context, basically all the books ever written, it's 175 terabytes, so what we did in the UK is 114 times all the books ever written in the world, so truly massive amount of data. But yeah, so basically to go to this blockchain, so obviously you know, just to set the basics straight, this is not the same thing as Bitcoin, not at all. So we are basically talking about an underlying concept to which Bitcoin is related, and I will explain why. So everybody in this room is obviously in the business of trust. So people hire lawyers because they need somebody they can trust with their business issues or also personal issues and so on. So you are trusted advisors, and trust is also very key to what blockchain is about. So it's a way to distribute and enhance trust. And obviously, I think many people know what a ledger is. It's a record of transactions, can be a book or an electronic record, and in the same way, blockchain is a ledger. So it's a place where you record transactions, basically. And It's decentralized, so of course this means that there is no one central authority, government, company controlling it, and I will talk a little bit more about this as well. So why is all this revolutionary? So of course, you know, probably most people here have heard about blockchain, and there's so much hype about it. Gartner has this concept of a hype curve, and I think we're very high up in the hype curve, which means that everybody thinks that they're going to make a lot of money, and you know, it's a gold rush. But then obviously what comes after that is actually the real sustainable business. So we are right now in that let's say part of the curve. But to put it in very simple terms, distributing trust, I think, is something that is very revolutionary here. That you know, I come from Finland, and Nordic countries often have systems where the government provides you know, certificates and servers and so on, where you can authenticate documents there. You know that if I electronically sign something, it's me, but in the end it's still one central authority, right? And this blockchain actually enables to do these kind of things globally. So basically you don't really need to rely on some government or some company to actually do this. And even in the Nordic countries we see this as a problem, because of course the governments, they have to ask for access fee to these services like authentication servers and so on, and it's not free, right? It's not something that's paid by the tax dollars, but potentially with blockchain you can do these services for free. And the last thing about blockchain is of course that in the chain itself you can store all kinds of data. So just to go over some central concepts here, these are discussed more in detail in the presentation as well, but so obviously, like I said, this is distributed. So distributed systems means that in the concept of, and in the question of blockchain, it means actually that the chain exists on all the participants' computers at the same time, or a very large part of it. So it's not really fetched from any single place at any time. So obviously a blockchain is a chain of blocks that all relate to each other, and then all the data is kept in the distributed system. Tokens, actually, this is something that most people, I think, know. So Bitcoin, for example, is a token. It's in a sense a reward for participating in the system. And there are participation tokens and then non-participation tokens. So, you know, you either get a reward for participating, or you can potentially get a reward for even, in a sense, not participating. Rewards are really important in this kind of distributed computing, because if you are not rewarded for contributing computing resources, then why would you contribute computing resources, right? So this is the way why Bitcoin got so popular, because Bitcoin is the reward for participating in this blockchain activity. And then of course, public versus non-public. This is also something that I touch upon here. Public meaning everybody can access, and then non-public is kind of a hybrid between centralized authority and distributed computing. So this is I think the most technical part of the presentation. But okay, so when we're talking about a chain of blocks, each containing data, each relating to each other, then it's important to understand what actually makes this system so secure and kind of unique, right? So a hash function is something that where in a small amount of, I would call it data, it can be a string of characters or so, you can store a lot of data in that small amount, right? Because you make a mathematical calculation and then use that to store the data. This is good to understand in terms of an analogy, right? So I think many remember, it's certainly not the case in Finland anymore, but in the libraries they used to have these index cards, right? Where you can find like each book and so on, because the library is so big and it's really difficult to find. So this hash function is very similar to that, right? You get certain string and that tells you you can find it in this and this block in the whole blockchain, right? And so basically when these functions are calculated for the data, these hashes are calculated, they all relate to each other because it is like a tree, right? So all the blocks, they relate to each other. And that basically means in terms of the blockchain, so this is, I think, a rudimentary illustration of the blockchain. So let's say there's a block 10, 11, 12, and so on. Each block, it contains these hash calculations. And this basically means that because the whole blockchain is available for everybody, right? I can go and pick up block 10 from XYZ years ago. If I make changes to that, I would have to change all the blocks after that as well, right? Because otherwise the calculations are wrong, because every calculation relates to every block, right? So in very rudimentary terms, what this actually means is that it's really difficult to fake things here, right? So in theory, you would have to control more than 50% of the computing resources of the whole network, right? So if you can imagine that if there are millions of participants, then you would need to really control more than 50% of this whole network. So it's really difficult to do. You can't really take over the network. It's not like you can hack a central authority, right? These government-based central authorities, they are you can basically hack them, but this kind of system is really, really difficult to hack. In theory, maybe it's possible to do this with a quantum computer, but then again, that's more like a situation where everything, the whole digital economy in a sense is at risk, right? Because this is just a form of doing similar things than encryption does as well. So of course, if somebody develops a system to break encryption, break this, then it's everything. So that needs to be redone. So in a sense, I think the key takeaway here is that it's really, really difficult to make any kind of forgeries or these kind of things in this. So any data saved in this blockchain, it's relatively safe there. So talking about rewards, so this is what most people know. It's basically Bitcoin, right? So you have this network of the blockchain basically. So it's an amount of data that's distributed to blocks, and each block has X amount of these hash calculations in it, right? So in order to do those calculations, because there is no central computer, no central authority, no, I don't know, Finnish state, right, paying the bill to calculate. So you need to incentivize people, and the way, which is very ingenious and why this is also partially revolutionary, is that they developed Satoshi and others, they developed this Bitcoin as a reward, right? So there's a limited amount of Bitcoin, and for each hash calculation that you do to calculate these transactions, you get rewarded X amount of Bitcoin for each block. So that really incentivizes people to contribute computing resources to this blockchain, and really to upkeep the blockchain in a world where it's expensive to keep up a data center, it's expensive to keep up infrastructure, but now actually individual people and organizations are contributing resources here because they want money, they want the Bitcoin, they want part of that incentive. And of course there are other systems as well, like Ethereum, that where you can get storage and other things as a reward. But so I think that the main takeaway here And of course, this is something that I've been myself personally following a long time, this blockchain, and I think there are misunderstandings here. It's key really to understand the difference between the blockchain, which is not really dependent on the Bitcoin. The Bitcoin is just something to incentivize people to participate in this blockchain. It can be anything, right? But so far, I think in the human society, the money and something related to that is the best incentivization for participation. So that's just something that keeps this up. So in a sense, I have a lot of background in the open source. I'm doing a lot of open source business as well and advising open source companies and so on. It's a different thing in a sense. It's kind of more developed way of doing community business, because in the open source movement, there wasn't really any money involved. Before, maybe big companies got in and they started paying people salaries so that they would contribute computer code to these open source systems. But here, that problem really didn't exist from the start, because there was this Bitcoin, so you don't really need to have these intermediaries, to have these big companies who pay the bills. So really, really revolutionary, ingenious stuff here. So, of course, decentralization. So the picture here, this is just an example of a decentralized organization. So most of us, we work in a hierarchical organization. There is people at the top, and then in the between and below. And then distributed organization would be, of course, something that, let's say, is maybe not so clear who does what and so on. So, of course, it's also something here that actually contributes to the strength of this the whole network, that you really, in a sense, don't have the one place where to attack or where to go and bring down the whole network. So that's the strength of these distributed systems and networks like the blockchain. And also really difficult also for strong actors like governments or companies to influence this. And then if one participant tries to change, let's say, the data in the block, then others will do the verification calculations and actually say that no, this is wrong, right? So in Bitcoin's case, for example, or in the Bitcoin blockchain case, the blockchain is updated every 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes the network is updated with the kind of consensus of what happened. So in a span of 10 minutes you would have to basically take over the whole network and change every transaction that has been ever done before that point of time. Yeah, so okay, this is a concept that is interesting to companies. So obviously, blockchain itself is public; everybody can access to what not. But it's possible also to run these with a kind of a quasi-centralized authority. Let's say a company like IBM can run their own blockchain, then control who can access and so on. And then it has benefits. So of course, because it's not open for everybody, so then there's the confidentiality part. That's really good there, but then of course it's something that where that company or government or whatnot who's running these would have to pay resources and then really upkeep also part of the system, because maybe the incentives are not as strong as, for example, in the case of blockchain where people are incentivized with this Bitcoin. And yeah, just some example that I thought of while coming here is that, for example, banks could have their own blockchain. They share the anti-money laundering information there potentially, and this also brings some interesting antitrust issues and so on, where ledgers are shared between companies and who can access what ledger and what not. So just quickly some interesting use cases that I've encountered myself while I've been kind of following this. I generally follow a lot of technology topics because always looking for things to do. So shipping voting. Voting is something that I will mostly skip here because it's pretty controversial, because electronic voting and then putting, let's say, blockchain there, it's something that is still a problem that hasn't really been solved, and putting blockchain there doesn't really solve the problem. But yeah, virtual currencies, authentication, and smart contracts. So shipping, for example, IBM has been quite active in this space. So, when you want to ship heavy cargo from one place to another, there's a lot of documents generated. So if you can put those documents in the blockchain or similar ledger that is shared, then it makes actually things really, really good, because often these documents are forged, right? So, value is changed, the amount of goods in the container may be changed, so that people are, doing corruption on the way. So this can help protect the companies, the shippers, and governments potentially. Yeah, so virtual currencies, obviously talked about. So Bitcoin, and so this is just a screen grab that I did yesterday, and this shows actually the height means the number of the block, and then basically it also shows what is the reward for calculating that block. So it's around 12 Bitcoin for calculating one block, and of course this reward is shared between all the participants who calculate these transactions using their computers or servers. And then the hash is, like I said, it's an index number, so makes this kind of conceptually understandable. And authentication. So actually, this is also something that when I refer to central authorities, basically this is something that, for example, Nordic countries, they provide, and this can be done, I think, much cheaper, much more efficient in the blockchain. So, am I me, or do I have access to this system? So potentially this is something that can take over the passwords and those kind of means of authentication, maybe ID cards and whatnot potentially. And there's smart contracts of interest obviously here in the room. So you could potentially put a contract into this blockchain, calculate the hash for it, it is there, and then once certain events are reached, then the contract is automatically executed. So, but this applies to a lot of other things with triggering events. So you can, because the blockchain is open for everybody, the program can then look for certain, let's say, hash from the blockchain and then execute at a certain agreed time based on that. So yeah, so basically this is my contribution to this conference, and please, if you have questions, ask. The topic is relatively technical, but I tried to explain it in as simple terms as I explained it to myself as well. So yeah, thank you.
Simplemente como takeaways de esto, blockchain es un registro descentralizado, puede ser usado en múltiples industrias, el sistema tarda más o menos 10 minutos en cargar y contrastar toda la información y siempre va aumentando en su tamaño. Blockchain cuando se choca un block con el otro, hace la revisión de cuál es digamos, el contenido de datos más largo, y eso impide necesariamente que haya el problema del double spending, que llaman, es simplemente que se use o que se altere el registro. En el mundo de los bitcoins se ha hablado siempre del tema del doble pago, pero esto puede ser aplicado a cualquier tipo de tecnología, y eso hace que pueda ser usado en múltiples industrias, porque lo que decía Markku es, para que el sistema de blockchain pueda ser alterado, se requeriría más o menos, y en teoría, porque no ha pasado nunca, un computador cuántico. Lo que sí es problemático es que pierdan la clave, ¿no? Porque tal vez de esto han entendido que funciona con una clave pública y otra privada. La pública, digamos, es conocida por todos, pero la privada solamente la conoce cada uno de los usuarios del sistema. Si pierden la clave privada, pues hay gente que ha perdido, por ejemplo, en criptomonedas millones por ese tema, ¿no? Entonces, para ya ahora hablar la aplicación práctica jurídica, tenemos a nuestro experto Felipe Dannemann, que ya les hice la presentación, pero yo creo que por el tiempo, Felipe, adelante, y hacemos las preguntas que tengan al final.
Buenos dias. Well, I'm sorry I'm going to speak in English. My portuñol is not enough for more formal presentation, so I apologize in advance. But I would try to make my best to make this interesting and really practical. I think Markku really introduced well the topic. You know, it's a very complex technology. We need to kind of understand it, and I'm going to try to, you know, really put it to concrete terms and try to explain to you how we can potentially use it in our day-to-day work and practice. So basically what we learned is that blockchain is a block database where you can, you know, store any sort of data, and once we're speaking about IP, which is basically a registration procedure where you register things, right? You register intellectual rights. So if you're talking about a technology that permits to register any type of data in a trusted, in a very safe way, why not use it in IP? So we learned it's also a distributed ledger technology. The immutable aspect is also a very important one because that's what brings trust to the whole system and can kind of like eliminate a lot of the transaction costs in all fields, but also in IP. And that's what we need to have in mind. So basically, you can register anything on blockchain. And so why can we apply it to IP rights then? Well, of course, yes. And that's what I'm going to try to show to you here, some practical examples of how we can use it in our day-to-day work. So there's potential application in every area of IP. I mean, we're talking here about you can, you know, have applications in the trademark field, patents, designs, copyrights, all sort of IP transactions. Why not smart licensing contracts? You know, this would be a good example. You could put a contract. I mean, nowadays you do already have licensing standard contracts, but here you could like put it on online in a trusted way, in a way that people wouldn't be able to tamper it, wouldn't be able to alter the terms of the contract. And as Markku said, you know, you could have, once the parameters of a certain licensee are met, for example, you could have the contract being autonomous or being autonomously granted. So this could be a very useful use in licensing, for example. So it's basically a new form of registration. Is it going to replace the current and traditional places of registrations like trademark patent office? Here I will disagree a little bit with Juan. I don't think so. I think it will not replace those traditional places. But those offices, they have to bear in mind this new technology. And for sure, I think they will need to, at some point, start using the technology to help them enhance their own registration procedures. So it's something to really keep in mind, also for government bodies and registration offices, not only for the practitioners like us, but I don't think it will ever replace their work. Here, just an example in Brazil, which is not exactly blockchain, but it's how one of its features can be used in practice, is the case of registration of software in Brazil, which used to be a very lengthy, very bureaucratic process. It would take years, and it would bring a huge challenge to the Brazilian Patent and Trademark Office because they had to store those paper files for over 50 years, which was the duration of protection of software in Brazil. And they had huge problems with that because sometimes you would need to print, you know, this huge codes, which was thousands and thousands of pages, and how do you protect them if you would have a fire, if you had a flood, or they were responsible for protecting those concrete documents. And how they solved it is that nowadays the font code of the software is transformed into a hash, which is used in blockchain, and then you only store this hash, and the care for the font code itself remains the responsibility of the software owner, but through the hash you can have a very safe verification method to make sure that what you submitted to the Patent and Trademark Office is actually the font code of the software. I mean, if you need to use it in court at a later point. So this is just a reference to something that it's not exactly blockchain, but it's one of the features used in blockchain already being applied in practice. Just to provide a little bit of context, blockchain technology has generated a frenzy of patent filings. So hundreds and hundreds of patents are related to blockchain lately. And as usual, China is in the lead position. I mean, if you take a look at the rank, a lot of the leading companies applying for patents in blockchain technology come from China. So that's something to look for. Now really coming into more practical uses. For example, blockchain can be very useful in the fight against counterfeit. Here I brought an example of an application that allows users to, by means of their own smartphones, to scan products in supermarkets and see their whole chain of production. So for example, if the buyer only eats organic food, I mean, he can personally check through a pretty safe means if that product is indeed organic, if through the whole production procedure it has abide by the rules of organic products. So this can be very useful for consumers actually buying. And this becomes really relevant when we talk about counterfeit of food, which might not be a big issue in South America, maybe in the US, but it is a big issue in China, for example. So the blockchain technology can provide a very fast and reliable way of identifying food that has been tampered, that has been falsified or counterfeit in some way. Same thing in the pharmaceutical field. Here's also another example of an application that you can verify the whole supply chain. So you can verify from the moment the molecule, the chemistry of the pharmaceutical product was first produced in the factory, all the way until they came, transportation, how it was delivered, what kind of weather, climate conditions it faced during distribution phase, until it arrived at the pharmacy to be bought by a consumer, for example. So this can be very useful too for counterfeit of pharmaceutical products. You can check the whole chain of production and distribution. So again, a very practical application against counterfeits. Here's another practical example. This is a very interesting and probably one of the first initiatives involving blockchains and counterfeit, which is the production of diamonds. We all know that a lot of diamonds come from conflict regions. They're called the blood diamonds. And this is a blockchain initiative that permits you to also follow the whole chain of production of diamonds. And this allows that when you're in a jewelry store and you're going to buy a jewelry, a diamond, you can check from where it comes from, and then the consumer will have the choice, well, is this a conflictive area? Do I want to buy a diamond from that region, which is probably, providing for a lot of violence and coming from very strange conditions? Do I want to do that or not? And this is, again, empowerment of consumer and a very practical application that people have in their own hands to fight not necessarily counterfeits here, but to find questionable origins of diamonds. Online piracy too, this is also an application, Custos, which they do a very simple idea, but it's based on blockchain. They put a watermark in online files. This is very relevant, for example, in the movie industry, that they first sent the movie when it was not yet released to the public, to the critics, and this is where a lot of counterfeit and a lot of online piracy occurs. And with this solution here, movie producers, they just are notified if one of the copies that they sent to those critics is uploaded or is copied by somebody else, and they have really clear guidance as to where the copy occurred, so they can really focus on the person or the entity that did that, non-authorized copy. So very practical to fight online piracy. And again, blockchain is key here because since it's immutable, it cannot be changed, it cannot be tampered with. You have a whole lot of amount of trust, in that technology. So you kind of trust that it cannot be authored. So this can be very useful too. Trademarks. Let's move into another IP field. Why not use it to prove use? This is of course more relevant in countries where the rights over a trademark derive from use, like the US, more common law countries, but also in civil law countries like the South American countries. Why not produce evidence of use in forfeiture procedures or prior user rights through blockchain? This can be a very handy, very practical, very inexpensive way of providing proof of use. So this is a potential application. There are also, I brought here an example of an application that already provides that. It's more focused on US, because of the whole use system, but it can also be used in those forfeiture or prior user rights procedures. Proof of infringement, who has never faced a problem to prove infringement of a trademark online? I think everybody in this room who works with trademarks has faced this challenge before. So blockchain is a very good way of providing that kind of evidence. Actually, how do you do it normally? Through notary certificates, which can be, reasonably expensive and bureaucratic means of evidence, and blockchain can be quicker and less expensive. And in that point, here I brought this application. It's a Brazilian application called Original My, and the interesting thing is that last week, the first Brazilian, it was not a court decision based on blockchain evidence, but it was the first time a Brazilian court, the Court of Appeals of São Paulo, has mentioned evidence stored on blockchain and has acknowledged its existence. It was a case, it was not an IP case, it was a defamation case, a criminal law case, a politician in Brazil complaining that he was defamed by a third party on the internet, and he provided proof of that defamation through blockchain registration. And the court did not decide the case yet, so we cannot yet say that blockchain was accepted by Brazilian courts, but it has mentioned the evidence and has asserted that it's valid. So it's a very important evolution. It kind of signalizes that blockchain produced evidence will be accepted in Brazil, which can be very, very good. I mean, everybody in this room probably knows Wayback Machine, which is a very useful application to prove infringement online. But then you always have the problem that Wayback Machine, a lot of judges, they look at that and they say, well, but how do you prove to me that that hasn't been altered? So, and with blockchain, if it's immutable, you don't have that problem anymore. And this application, Original My, it's kind of a sort of a Wayback Machine, but using blockchain. So this kind of solves this problem. So it's going to be very interesting to monitor this case and see how it's going to be decided and how it's going to be applied on an actual court decision in Brazil. I am eagerly awaiting to see that. So, for example, another potential application, protection of slogans. I don't know about other countries, but in Brazil, for example, slogans are not protectable as trademarks. So usually the solution is to register at the National Library, or have it registered at the notary register. And these are, again, can be bureaucratic, can be quite reasonably expensive procedures. And why not use blockchain to register those slogans, or at least the ones that are not that important, at least that maybe they are not so financially relevant for the activity, but they do have an intrinsic value. I mean, this could be also a practical use. So here, just bring an example of a blockchain application that you can actually insert your own signature to a document. So you just provide the information there, and it generates a blockchain registered document actually signed by you. This could be useful also for contracts and for other applications. But here you can basically put the author's name behind the slogan and have it registered in a very fast, it takes literally 5 minutes to do that. So another potential application. Why not for portfolio management, transfer of ownership, co-ownership, alteration of names, and actually here I brought this application to you, Vault2. There's already an application providing for that. When you're doing transfer ownerships in multinational companies on a global scale, it can really save a lot of transaction costs if you can do it in a safe way, automatically and centralized. So this is something, for example, for Patent and Trademark Office to look after, because this can be something that might be helpful for them to integrate their own activities and provide for more rapid solutions in portfolio management. Design and copyrights. Who has never faced the challenge to protect, let's say, a clothing collection? I personally have that. I have some clothing companies as clients, and there was always a problem saying, well, if I'm going to protect each of the piece of my clothing collection, this is going to get really expensive. I don't have the financial means to do that. I don't want to do that. I'll protect only maybe the real, original, important ones. But blockchain, since it's very inexpensive, it's fast, why not protect the whole clothing collection? And then maybe you just pick up the really important pieces, and then you protect it through design. But this can be very helpful in future infringement cases. I've done that before. I never used it in court, so I didn't have the opportunity yet. But I think it's just a matter of time that we're going to be seeing people enforcing rights against infringers through blockchain evidence. Same for marketing and publicity campaigns. We had a big problem in Brazil that how would you register at the public library, for example, a film? This was a big issue because they didn't accept electronic files, so you basically had to print all the screens of the film and kind of like submit the paperwork and register that, which was not very practical. So why not, protect publicity campaigns, marketing campaigns on blockchain? You can just upload the video file, the electronic file, and you have a registration, which is, as we learned from Markku, if it's immutable, if it's something that cannot be changed, it's a good proof. Copyrights, proof of authorship, it's usually the main challenge in copyrights, right? Because you don't actually need a proper registration to have the copyrights over a work, but it's usually the challenge is to prove that you're actually the author of that work and that you created that at a certain point in time. So here's a very easy solution that you just upload your work as a file and you register on blockchain. You know, it can be very similar to what we talked on about slogans, and this can be applied to any type of copyrights, any type of work. I mean, it can be literature, films, music, anything can be registered potentially on blockchain. So this is a useful application. Use and remuneration in copyrights. Here's some blockchain applications and platforms are proposing is that it basically, how does it work today with streaming platforms? I mean, you have a centralized platforms that you know, provides all this music or all these work there. You pay a monthly fee or you pay some sort of a fee to have access to that. That a central entity kind of collects, you know, that payment and pays the authors of which work is available there. What blockchain and these blockchain-based platforms are proposing is that you might have a way of doing that automatically. And of course, when you have these centralized systems, you have a big transaction cost because sometimes, even though you have collective societies for copyrights, it's sometimes even hard to find who the copyright holder is. So, you know, you even want to make the payment, but you know, you don't really know who the copyright holder is, or, you know, you spend a lot of time trying to find out who he is. And what the blockchain system proposes that you can have an automatic system. The moment you listen to a music or you download a literature, the author will automatically get his share of payment. So this could be also revolutionary in streaming platforms, which were already a very recent revolution in terms of the music industry and sharing files. So I'm coming to the end here. Just as an example here, this was an initiative by Kodak, you know, a very famous brand in the past that kind of like lost the trend of digital photography, you know, had really huge financial problems. They started with this Kodak coin, you know, this blockchain-based application for the sharing of photos and illustrations. It was a big hype last year. This year it was kind of already went down, so it's not really working so well. But it's just an example that even very traditional brands have been trying to use blockchain to, you know, kind of resuscitate their activities. And what about the courts? I mean, we talked about this recent Brazilian decision acknowledging blockchain-based evidence, but do we actually have any court decision accepting evidence registered on blockchain? And the answer is yes. I mean, there's not that many. I know of only one decision, and that's from a court, the Internet Court in China. And they actually decided a case which went on the plagiarism of a newspaper article. It was an online article published in a newspaper website and blog. And this was plagiarized by a competitor, and the infringement action was brought before the Internet Court in Hangzhou in China, and all the evidence was produced based on blockchain, and actually the decision was rendered, you know, fining for the copyright infringement and acknowledging that the blockchain evidence was valid. So actually we already have indication then that courts will accept this type of evidence. In Brazil, as said, I don't have any knowledge of any decision already based on blockchain evidence, but by looking at the Brazilian Civil Procedure Code that foresees, you know, the submission of any type of evidence, I don't see any restriction for the rendering of decisions based on blockchain evidence. So that's it. I tried to just bring some practical uses for you guys. Please, if you have any questions and would like to discuss further, just let us know. Many thanks.
Muchísimas gracias, Felipe. Bueno, yo creo que vieron ahí la gran cantidad de usos de blockchain y yo creo que podía Felipe seguir hablando del tema largas horas. La idea también de esta conferencia es también dejarles la inquietud más allá de resolver todas las inquietudes o todas las dudas posibles. A quienes les ha llamado la atención esto, los invito, perdón por la publicidad, a ser parte del comité de tecnología. Es muy importante que desde ya estemos atentos de acuerdo con Singularity University, para el 2030 va a darse el momento de cruce en el que quienes no comprendan este tipo de cosas, particularmente inteligencia artificial y este tipo de soluciones técnicas como blockchain, simplemente van a quedar atrás. Es decir, les va a tocar de alguna manera modificar su aproximación a la vida. ¿Por qué? Porque muchos de nosotros escogimos ser abogados y cuando estábamos pequeños nos decían que ¿qué quieres ser cuando grande? Y nosotros decíamos abogados. Ahora la recomendación es que no se haga esa pregunta, porque esa pregunta se puede resolver máximo a 5 años o a 10 años, pero no para toda la vida, porque todo el tiempo hay que estar cambiando la perspectiva que vamos a hacer en la siguiente década. Entonces quería preguntarle al comité cuánto tiempo tenemos para preguntas. ¿Tenemos preguntas? ¿Tenemos tiempo para preguntas? Ok, perfecto. Entonces, por favor, todas las inquietudes que tengan con nuestros expertos. 10 minutos. Ok, tenemos 10 minutos para preguntas. Yo creo que se nos da para 3 o 4 preguntas.
Hi, Mauricio Sanchez from Calderón and de la Sierra. It's 2 questions in one. I was looking at the examples, the use cases, and I saw that most of them are private blockchains, right? So how are we going to incentivize the participants to get involved, to enter information, to be active in the network if there is no token available? That's one. And the second one is I can see that most of the issues involve real-world issues and virtual world issues. How are we going to ensure that the information that comes from the real world to the virtual world to the blockchain world is going to be trustworthy? Because that's mostly where the failure point is. So if the information is not coming trustworthy or real information, we're going to have a problem because nothing is going to work.
Yeah, so maybe I'll answer at least the first question. So, yeah, really good question, good point. So, I think that the logical, let's say, solution for that, let's say, for example, in the case of a big company like IBM having their own blockchain system, is that they would then have to contribute significant amount of computing resources to keep up that private blockchain. So that's the simplest answer. Of course, then you can have also rewards within this kind of closed circle, but then, of course, what is the value of that? But potentially you can do rewards with just like Ethereum does, in a sense that, you know, the reward is part of the computing resources of the whole network, like storage also you get as a reward. But yeah, private systems obviously have this limitation.
To the second point, I mean, I think you touched on the very point. That's the main risk. Of course, you know, since you can register any type of data, any type of files, you know, if the file from the real world, as you mentioned, is a falsified, then you're going to have produced false evidence, right? But then again, then you have to use the legal means to, you know, fight falsified documents. And I think the solution will be the same that we use today for, you know, you can submit anything to court as well, right? I mean, you can submit false documents to the court to prove your point. And then the other party will have to question that and prove that those documents are false. And so I think the same rationale will be applied for blockchain based evidence. And I think in that sense, of course, you touch on a very important point, but in that sense, I think the solution will be the same that we already have nowadays. So.
How do you see actually for either for Markku or for Felipe, how do you see blockchain being used by, IP offices now in the near future, and the interaction that may have with law firms? I mean, if they're going to be, both within the same, blockchain, the management of, patents, trademark, etc., or I'm just curious, how do you see it in the future? Where is it going?
Do you want, Markku?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting point. I think, as I mentioned, I believe that blockchain will never really substitute, replace those registration offices. But again, they will probably at some point need to use the technology in their own benefit. And then I think, since we're talking about integration, I think law firms will need somehow to be integrated to that system as well. I mean, so. I don't know if it will be a public blockchain or if it will be a private network. Probably due to particularities, it will be a private blockchain network for the registration offices. But then they would probably need to allow law firms and registered agents to also have access to that network, so they could really work together, and they would need to kind of talk to each other, right? So. That's how I see. I don't know if this is a near future. I don't think so. I think this is a really long-term future, but at some point, I think this is a tendency.
Yeah, I think so too. That actually, if you let's say look at what's happening in the world right now, there's a lot of skepticism, right, about a lot of things, right? So people are skeptical, and then connecting, let's say, that to this discussion is that maybe actually it's more beneficial to have these as many or as much as possible like these open ledgers, because then everybody can verify, okay, what's happening there. They don't necessarily see who has done what, but they can see the transactions and what is there. So maybe it helps to, let's say, combat the skepticism as well. It's just like what Felipe mentioned, for example, food counterfeiting, right? So I know for a fact that it's, for example, a huge issue in Russia as well. And then if you can't trust the local authorities, then, maybe people themselves, if they can verify the data, they could trust the food they eat more and these kind of things. So.
Solo para mencionar algo, realmente esto es una tecnología y la voluntad política también va a determinar mucho lo que suceda en el futuro. Porque la solución ya está y podrían tener muchísimos, digamos, aplicativos, pero ahí va a haber otras consideraciones pues, de carácter político, como las tasas oficiales y el hecho de que las oficinas necesitan igual hacer gestión política de la propiedad intelectual adicionalmente, ¿no?
Anyway, in the sense of, of course you have the technology of blockchain on one side, and then you have all of the development of, artificial intelligence, at least in the field of IP. Which one do you see? I tend to believe that, AI is a little bit more advanced right now into our day-to-day operations. Blockchain not as much. Do you see in the future some integration of AI with blockchain, or how do you see the balance in the future for at least, the IP profession? I know it's not.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can try to answer that. So I think that, AI is also one of those fields that used to be called, I think, statistics before. So now it's AI. So we've had those capabilities for a long time. I think now potentially with let's say this kind of distributed databases, then with so much more data, then you can make better conclusions, right? That's the whole game. The whole thing about AI is that the more data you have, potentially, as long as you know what questions to ask, then you can get better results. So I think it doesn't really matter where that data comes from. Of course, I think society at large is better that it's open. Everybody can see and verify that data, because any AI system. So lately we for example, had an issue in Finland, I don't know, this is probably also relevant for your countries, that before the elections there are these kind of websites where you can choose your candidate, right, based on some questions and so on, and the algorithm there was wrong, but they published the source code, so some AI researcher actually noticed that the algorithm was done in a wrong way, and it was actually suggesting the wrong election candidates to people. So this is maybe the kind of, let's say, link. Yeah, exactly, kind of good link to blockchain and AI, that if you can verify the data, if it's open, then you can make these AI systems better.
¿Alguna pregunta adicional? Bueno, no, muchísimas gracias a nuestros expertos y a ustedes por el tiempo. Gracias.